house in the 86th district. Thomas Albert is
Okay,
actually
not far from me.
Oh, good.
I'm in the Kentwood area.
Oh, yeah, really close. So, Thomas Albert is my representative, and he's a big gun guy. And I'd love to hear his views, but one thing I'm going to start this over because I think it's more important just to talk about it. I'm Lauren Taylor, and I'm running for State House Representative. It's good to meet you. What was your name?
Tom Lambert, President and Legislative Director of our state's government.
Michigan Open Carry. I see you got a sign here that says reasonable conversations. That means so much. And I have to admit straight off, I'm learning a lot about guns and gun legislation. And
I think that's important for everybody, regardless of what side you stand on. We have to understand how things work, both in how government functions work, how firearms work, how everything works. That's the way we create good policy. If we're going to create policy off of misunderstanding, well, that's how we create bad policy.
That's a really interesting thing to say. So how do we work together to make a difference? I can tell that you're here because you are just as upset as I am about the loss of life going on. And I heard you say something about blood makes headlines. How do we do something about that so we don't have these headlines?
There's a number of different answers to that question. Well, one way is the media and how they cover it. We can try and cover the instances where we stop people just as much as the instances where we don't stop people. A lot of times people do these things to get attention. Stop giving them attention. That's just a list of things that we could do.
That's a really good point.
And that's just from the media side of things.
Sure.
After something has already happened. Well, then there's the proactive side of it. Well,
I want to hear about the proactive.
Let's even, before we get to the proactive side of things, there's the incident. We can stop them from doing what they're doing by putting up a fight. What that fight looks like is a matter of debate. When I say I want to put firearms in schools, a lot of people just hear that and they immediately turn off. There was a guy here earlier, he heard that and just immediately turned off.
Why do you think they do that?
It varies person by person, and I don't want to lump everybody into one group. In my experience, a lot of people turn off because they immediately think, not everybody, but a lot of people turn off because they immediately think that the analogy I use is I want to open an armory every morning and hand a gun out to every teacher as they walk in the door. That is absolutely not the case.
You don't feel that way?
No, I do not want to hand a gun out. I do not want to put a firearm into the hands of anyone that does not want it.
Okay.
You make it very clear. If you do not, if you're a teacher, if you're a staff member, if you're somebody you don't want to carry a firearm, I don't want you to carry a firearm.
Why don't you want them to?
Because that's something that you need to be able to want to do. You need to be able to be confident in it. You need to know what you're doing in order to do it.
I think you're right about that.
And if you don't want to, then don't. But at the same time, if somebody is confident, if somebody does want to do it, if somebody can get the training, I think we should allow them to do that. And in the circumstances under which we allow them to do that, we can discuss that.
Do you think there should be that kind of training before people get a gun and can take it onto the streets, or is it safe enough the way it is?
Well, that's a different conversation. Let's
fair enough.
Arming people in schools versus out in the general public. That's a completely different conversation.
Do you think so?
Yes, completely different conversation.
Why?
Arming people in schools is about safety of children. Walking out in the streets is more, the focus there is about exercising. I'm a firearms instructor. I'm certified by numerous organizations to teach classes.
I'm glad you do that.
I love training. I think people should get trained. Training is a fantastic thing. Should training be required in order to exercise your right? And that's the difference there. However, if it's staff members that we want to arm, arming somebody through the course of their employment to protect a school, we're starting to talk about safety provisions or policy, if you will, rather than somebody generally exercising their right. Not to say that there are people that say you have a right to carry in school. There are people say you don't have a right to carry in school. Let's just forget about that for a second, because that can go on for a long time, right? But arming staff members, I've been all over this thing. I've talked to many teachers. I've talked to many administrators, principals, police. There are a lot of people already in our schools that are former law enforcement, that are former military. They've already had training. they told me that if they could just pay for their own training, to continue their own training on top of what they already have, carry their own firearms in a manner where the kids can't get to it, they would do that, and it wouldn't cost the school, it wouldn't cost the state a single penny. It might not get a firearm into every single school, but it's at least a start. And when we hear this debate, one side says only the police should have guns, the other side says, well, no, we should have guns too. Well, in there, it seems to me that we have overlap on certain people should have guns. Mm-hmm. And so, can we start there?
I you know what? That common ground I think is really, really important. And I'm hearing a lot of things you're saying that are proactive that I can appreciate. I do believe in Second Amendment rights, and I do think that every person in this country who is safe to give a gun should have a gun. The question is, how do we keep it safe? How do we? Right, exactly. And we feel, and obviously we feel the same about that.
Let me underscore. We do feel the same. There are people that should not have firearms in this country. 100%.
Who? In your opinion?
Well,
because I know that's debatable too.
Well, let me just throw a general category of mentally unstable people. And while there's people that will rightfully point out, well, there's a lot of mentally unstable people, but statistically speaking, they're less likely than the general public to harm someone. And they're right. They're very right with that. So I don't want to overgeneralize and say mentally unstable people. There are clear cases. Parkland, clear case. I don't know anyone that disagrees with that. There was a clear case. Most of the cases we're going to run up against are not going to be that. And so how do we sort it out? How do we sort it out properly? That's the question.
One thing you said that really struck me when I mentioned safety classes before getting a gun, and your response was about Second Amendment rights and the right to have a gun. Do you feel that having those safety classes, having to wait a minute before getting the gun, do you feel that the fact that people are allowed to get those guns after the safety classes, do those safety classes actually infringe on those rights if the people are still allowed to get the gun once it's determined that they can safely use it?
Well, what you described isn't actually policy, right?
Right.
You don't have to take a class before getting a gun. You have to take a class in this state before you get a license to be able to carry concealed.
Okay.
You can carry open, walk down the sidewalk without having a license to do so. But in order to get his license to conceal, that's where you have to take that class. And just looking at those two things, is there a difference between people that open carry without a CPL? You can open carry with a CPL too, but just anyone without a CPL that open carries, or anyone that carries open or concealed with a CPL, is there a difference in crime rate? Is there a difference in accidents? Is there a difference where something that we should be concerned in looking at? Truth is no. And so, when we look at other states, there are 13 states now that allow you to carry concealed without getting a license first. Did crime rates skyrocket in those states? Did accidental shootings skyrocket in those states? No. In fact, in most of the states, training went up. It's counterintuitive that you would take the requirement away from training and more people would go get training. It's a long conversation on why that is.
Yeah.
And it hasn't happened in every state, but it has happened in a lot of states.
How would you feel about mandatory training after you give someone a gun, if it was mandatory within a certain amount of time?
Well, again, should you have to have training in order to exercise your rights? Absolutely not.
No?
Absolutely not.
What about, I think a lot of people would argue that there are rights of people to know that they're safe from those who
have to have a right. You don't have a right to know that you're safe because you don't have a right to feel safe. Both of those things are effectively subjective.
We don't have a right to feel safe?
Because the way you, or what might make you feel safe and what might make me feel safe are completely different.
That's a good point.
And let's take it for example. I'm obviously on the pro-gun side. I think a lot of people on my side would say, I need to be able to have a firearm in order to feel safe. Therefore, anything that stops me from having a firearm infringes on my right to feel safe. And where somebody on the other side might say, well, I don't think anybody should be able to have a firearm, so that anything that gives somebody a firearm infringes on my right to feel safe. How do we rectify that?
That's
we
a really
can't.
good question. The things that we've been talking about, it seems like there's really a lot of room to compromise.
let me. Sorry to cut you off. Let me
No,
focus on
I
that.
want to hear what you have to say.
You kind of highlighted something I said before of
I didn't realize it.
the areas where we do agree and that we do overlap. And unfortunately, in times like this, I think too many people stand on both sides and just scream at each other.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And the areas that we overlap just can get completely ignored.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think we overlap? Because I agree that we do.
Well, I think there is some overlap. I don't know how much on arming at least somebody. I have to be willing to talk about who that is, but at least someone has to be able to come to fight. There's a lot of talk recently about these bills that take away firearms from people that are mentally unstable. We overlap in the area that some people shouldn't have firearms.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's another point that gets lost, because one side says they want everybody to have guns, and the other side says they're just trying to take away our guns. And well, no, come on, we agree that some people shouldn't have guns. I don't know anyone that disagrees with that.
Right. Well, I'm sure there are, because that, as you say, do those people have a right, the Second Amendment right, too?
Well, they have a right, but there's due process to take it right away. And so in the context of taking firearms away from those mentally unstable, legislation is introduced, they claim it respects due process. It absolutely doesn't respect due process. But there is a way to felons, or not felons. Let's say somebody in prison, okay? Well, they've gone through the process. They've been convicted of a crime. They've lost not only their Second Amendment right, but many other rights. And that's how things work.
Yeah.
Now there's a debate on whether or not
Is
felons.
this their Second Amendment?
They do. If you have any felony on your record, even if it's a non-violent felony, you can't fire. And then that's another debate. Well, if somebody is so dangerous, we can't allow them to have the firearm, why are we letting them out of jail? And so there are people that argue that, look, felons should be able to get their Second Amendment rights back once they pay their debt to society. After they get out, after they go through their probationary period, and especially ones that haven't committed violent felonies. Unfortunately, today, the number of felonies that exist today versus 50 years ago, it's gone too.
Petty death's considered a felony too.
Sorry, what?
Petty theft of $1,000 is more a felony,
Exactly right.
which I think is bullshit.
Oh, I think there's a lot of felonies actually. I think carrying a concealed pistol without a license, the fact that it's a felony is completely crap. Even California doesn't make it a felony. So you could have a president of a Michigan gun group say, I wish we could be more like California in that regard. And a lot of people go, what did he just say?
I'm sorry to butt into you guys' conversation.
No, that's okay.
I'm eager to
I think
ask
the video actually does that.
Okay.
My name's Tom.
My name's William. Alright, William, yeah. I ran for the state house in Florida, in my district in Orlando, right after polls. However, I lost to I have one question. A lot of people are saying, why don't we just arm teachers? Why don't Senator Marco Rubio agrees that we should not be able to arm teachers? Because what happens if there's an active shooter and the SWAT team comes? They're going to think everyone's probably not going to have a weapon. Which, if you have a weapon, they're going to probably confuse and shoot up that person, thinking that person's a shooter. I'm all for arming deputies in school, or deputies in school for security, but I just don't think teachers in that situation are capable enough to actually go through that situation.
You bring up an excellent point. Don't tell anyone, or don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Don't let anyone just brush what you said under the table. You bring up an excellent point.
My dad's a deputy, so.
Okay, I don't feel the same way you do, and the reason is first thing, by the time the SWAT team shows up, it's too late. I'm trying to think of an instance where the SWAT team has shown up and actually stopped something. In Parkland, for example, since it's our most recent one, and they're using that as an example, he finished with what he was doing and then tried to blend back in the crowd and took off. Right?
Apparently, he went to McDonald's
and Subway, right? Yeah. So, Sandy Hook, same way. Virginia Tech, same way. Colorado, same way.
Columbine happened right when the Subway was finished.
That's correct. And that's happened with 2 shotguns, a carbine, pistol caliber that took 10-round magazines, and 1 pistol where they had 3 magazines that were greater than 10 rounds. Virginia Tech, the guy had about 20 magazines. Most of them were 10-round magazines. And so that's why I think this focus on ARs is misplaced. Because, okay, take
the magazines.
Okay, take the AR away, take magazines away that are greater than, say, 10 rounds, you're still left with Columbine, you're still left with Virginia Tech, you're still left with a lot of these examples out there. And at the end of the day, there's been research done on fire rates, and is it really going to make that much of a difference? No, it's not. So, going back to what we originally talked about, by the time a SWAT team shows up, it's already too late. Also, the issue has been raised of, well, we can't have armed civilians because we might end up shooting them. I don't know of an instance of that happening. Not just in schools, but other places where armed civilians have stopped shootings. I don't know of a situation of that actually existing.
It makes sense though, doesn't it?
Well, it's one of those things where it makes sense, and that's why I said don't let anyone tell you it doesn't make sense.
Maybe the teacher had like a license.
But on closer evaluation, here's why it doesn't. It's kind of one of those things that makes sense on its face. I mentioned repealing the need to have training actually resulted in more people getting training. That's counterintuitive. Why. That doesn't make sense. But then when we look into it, we start finding out why.
Do you have an idea?
Well, there's numerous things that go into it. Things like the government-mandated training was crap, and when they no longer had to do the government-mandated training, they could start doing training that people wanted, that people would want to get.
Like take personal responsibility.
Well, you bring personal responsibility, which is the very next point. A lot of people went, oh, I don't have to get a license, I'm going to carry now. And they started carrying, and went, wait a minute, I need to get some training. And so they went and got the training. They did it backwards. Instead of getting training, then carrying, they carried and then went, okay, I need to get training. And the reason training went up was because more people started carrying because they could, and then they realized they needed training. There's more to it than that. Just
That's really similar to what we were saying, to what I was saying earlier, the idea of, so in that state, were they mandating training before getting?
Yes, and then they repealed it, and then training.
So then people started doing training after they got the gun.
And yep.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, but the question.
Except whether or not you can mandate people getting training after getting the gun.
Is it a great thing? Yes. Do I think the government should mandate it?
You probably
Why? I'm sorry. I still don't understand why it would be unreasonable to require that after you've acknowledged somebody's Second Amendment right?
Well, because it's not acknowledging somebody's Second Amendment rights. What if I said you needed to get a license to post on Facebook? A government license to post on Facebook?
Before I have Facebook or after?
Either one. You pick.
It sounds like I don't want to read this wrong, but it sounds like that's
don't be afraid to offend.
I appreciate that. That sounds like a First Amendment right, and a lot of people do like to bring up if you put any kind of stipulations on Second Amendment rights, then it's a slippery slope, and how about stipulations on First Amendment rights? But you know what? There are stipulations on First Amendment rights too, and there are reasons for it.
And those stipulations on the First Amendment rights. Try and trap you here, but what is the
warning?
What is the quote about theaters?
That's
can't yell fire. Yeah.
In a crowded theater, right? Yes, you can. The quote about you can't yell fire in a crowded theater is one that we hear all the time. Well, there's a limit on your First Amendment right. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
You can't threaten the President of the United States either or anything like
well,
that. Yeah.
Well, that's different.
Yeah.
Issuing a specific threat is different.
Yeah.
But that quote about fire in a crowded theater actually comes from an old Supreme Court opinion. One, the quote is wrong. It is the most misquoted piece of a Supreme Court opinion in the history of the United States. What they basically said is you can't falsely yell fire in a crowded theater with the intent to create havoc. If there's fire in a crowded theater, you can yell fire in a crowded theater.
Knowing people would know that, will probably stay silent.
But that's still...
If you don't intend to create havoc, you can yell fire in a crowded theater. Just so.
But if you intend to create havoc, then your First Amendment right is taken away.
Exactly. So if you intend to create havoc, your Second Amendment right is taken away. But training before getting it, that's not intended to create havoc. And I stipulate to you that the training, the background checks, do almost nothing. Like let's just statistically say nothing.
Like
just stop
like
people.
A placebo for people that want it?
Sure, it is. You can equate it to a placebo. I don't want to say that background checks do nothing, but stopping the people intent on harm, like these mass shooters, they do effectively nothing. How many mass shooters have to pass these background checks before we acknowledge this maybe isn't the answer, maybe we should look for some other things?
It's interesting to think about.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I care more about what
like
you
you
have to
should have
say.
brought more chairs.
No, it's okay because I'm used to
actually
this.
sit down.
No, I'm very comfortable here. Please continue with what you have to say.
You brought up an excellent point about mental health, about how partnerships never had it. I think that's the other fault. Because the guy already said he was going to shoot up a school on YouTube, and there's people that do it a lot more. However, Omar Martin, the guy who shot up Post Nightclub in Orlando, down the street from me, was a security guard. He was able to pass me. He had a domestic violence record. Why was he able to get it?
The security guard?
Yeah.
So you're not, or
Now, Omar, the mental health issue, right? People who are on Social Security who need someone to take care of their finances, do you think they should be able to have that?
yes.
So if they're not mentally able to do their own finances, they should still be able to have that?
Yes.
I respectfully disagree on that.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because if you're not in stable mind in order to handle your own finances and like pay your rent and all that, then why should you have a weapon?
Okay, well, the disconnect for me is
Handgun, however, handgun. If you're at your house and you live alone, you have someone taking care of your finances. Someone breaks into your house, you have every right to shoot that person up.
hang on. It's interesting that you brought that up. Hang on to that. So let's go back to the finances. Where the disconnect is for me is that not being able to manage your own finances does not equate to mental instability. There are just a lot of people, especially our elderly, that don't want. A lot of them don't know how to do online banking. They don't want to go have to deposit checks to the bank because maybe they can't get to the bank. So what they do is they give this authority to somebody else to do it on their behalf. Frankly, some of them are fully capable. They just don't want to deal with the crap, so they hand it off to one of their kids to do it.
And I know someone who has been in Social Security as a kid, but he's never got around to it where he was able to actually take care of his own finances.
And so the threshold you're using is, to me, the improper threshold. The threshold needs to be, is this person a danger to themselves or others? Not, are they managing their own finances?
Okay.
Are they a danger to themselves or others? We already have that. I know that it's been said that Republicans and Trump signed a law to allow mentally unstable people to have guns.
It's not just the Republicans, some Democrats are also filed by the end, right?
Well, the
What
state.
do you mean we already have that?
We already have mentally unstable people who are a threat to themselves and others. We can already stop them.
How can we stop that?
Was it 922?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
I want to get back to something you said.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to take your pin now, but put your pin in the mentally unstable bucket, okay? Remind me to
Okay,
come back.
the thing we already have.
You're good with a handgun in the house. 30 years ago, the big gun control groups were trying to ban handguns. In fact, the big one at the time was called Handgun Control Inc. They later renamed themselves to Brady Center Against Gun Violence or something. Brady, after they failed to ban handguns, they renamed themselves to Brady. The Brady campaign, which has now been, they still exist, but now they're surpassed by everything. Back in the 80s, it was ban handguns because handguns aren't military weapons, and therefore you have no right to possess them. Today, it's the exact opposite. Okay, handguns are okay because it's for self-defense, but for military weapons, you should ban. I just want to point that out to show how things have changed in the other side they're talking about. Because I think public perception has changed on handguns, and we recognize that a handgun is the most effective and efficient means possible to defend yourself.
If that's the case, then why do we need military-grade weapons?
Why do people carry around who use rocket launchers and stuff like that sometimes too? Like those type of people, I think they ruin it for a lot of
Do you want me to get to those or go back to the mental health?
Go on that.
The one I wanted you to
I wanna answer
elaborate
all of
on
these.
is what you said we have something in place already for mental health
Yes.
to stop them from
Both
having guns.
under federal law and under state law, there are provisions to prevent people that are mentally unstable from purchasing and possessing. Those are the two things: purchasing and possessing. Prohibits them. Now, how those take effect are what's important.
And how do you identify those people too?
Sure. That
And what counts as mentally unstable enough?
exactly right.
How would you address yourself to an officer? Let's say there's an active shooter that came over here and started shooting up, and I saw you have a concealed gun already. How would you address law enforcement to make sure we don't get shot?
Well, if somebody's active shooting, I'm not necessarily.
How would you handle that?
Forgive me if I'm not answering questions. I'm trying to catch these. As a CPL instructor, the state mandates an 8-hour class. All of the training is defensively oriented. We're not teaching people to go hunt down an active shooter and shoot them. We're teaching people to basically shelter in place and protect themselves. The training that law enforcement go through is orders of magnitude more than what a CPL holder. They're going through the offensive training. That is much harder. It is. You have to do threat identification. You have to do hot through rooms. Statistically speaking, members of law enforcement shoot innocent bystanders. It was like 11 times more likely to shoot innocent bystanders. It's not because members of law enforcement are poorly trained. It's not because they're bad people. It is because the armed citizen gets all the low-hanging fruit. We're not going into dynamic situations. We are shoot the guy in front of me that's trying to hurt me, and that's it. We get the easy ones. Law enforcement, they get all the hard ones.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought up law enforcement and guns and people getting shot, because what you're talking about and the idea that people who have guns in schools or whatever situation where they could shoot the shooter. Law enforcement has guns and they get shot all the time. How does that equate to the argument there?
Well, you don't get necessarily shot all the time.
Often enough. I mean,
Plus, they weren't going for the best.
Well,
I mean, the argument that people have made, surely people have made that argument too, or you make the argument to them that good guy with the gun, and stopping those shootings. But obviously the police they have guns.
and they do stop a number of threats. There have been instances of armed security, armed police officers, especially one of them was a sheriff's deputy in a school, stopped what was likely to look like it was going to turn into an active shooting. A student pulled out a gun, shot one person, shot another person, and was eventually stopped by the deputy.
A deputy that was stationed, that was at the school
Yes.
every day.
Yes.
I think-
You know what? I'm okay with that
And that's
idea.
kind of where I get into who has it. We can discuss that. I think it needs to be more than one deputy in school, or one trooper, or one officer in school.
Back in my county down in Florida, they're actually talking about not having too many deputies because it costs too much, so they want to hire private security to do it.
And that's
Either way, it works.
Then we get into the cost.
Yeah.
I have the idea of, well, let's use the former law enforcement, former military.
So
let
instead
them-
veterans.
Right, the ones that already have the training, the ones that are already in our schools, already as teachers, administrators, those people, and start.
I
will
like
say
the idea.
this. I'm
Please.
sorry. I will say this. When I first moved up here, my house got broken into in the middle of the night. All I had was a bat. I wish I had a handgun because I had a daughter and I had a son. That I just don't know how to